I'm from Uruguay. Yes.
Okay, which part of Uruguay, by the way?
Montevideo, the capital city.
Oh, beautiful. I've never been. Always wanted to go.
It's
And what's
beautiful.
your what's your
Small but
role?
beautiful.
What's your role there, by the way?
Okay, now I'm working as a learning consultant. I've worked my whole working life, active life, as an educational psychologist. In fact, here it's called psicopedagogia, or
Yeah,
psychopedagogue would be the translation. I know it's a career that doesn't exist as such in UK.
yeah,
But it's the closest translation would be educational psychologist. I
right.
like to translate it as a learning specialist because we don't just work with the learning processes in infants and adolescents, but also in adults and elderly people. So learning throughout life. But what I've been doing so far is working in schools as an educational psychologist and a learning support coordinator, head of well-being, different roles that involved the learning process apart from other areas of the development. And now I'm also working with adults in companies, learning
Okay.
inside companies.
And do you find, especially perhaps with the adults, or the adults, sorry, my northern accent, I put the stress on the syllable. No one else does, especially with the adults. Do you find that they've struggled at school? I mean, do you find there's any history, for instance, of dyslexia in the people that you deal with?
Yes, there are. The what we do, in fact, because when they are adults, what I feel is they have like usually a negative experience, or their memories of learning are not positive. Usually, especially adults nowadays that lived their childhood at a different time where maybe we didn't know so much and it was treated in a different way. And that sometimes affects their self-esteem and their self-concept when they are working, because when you're working, you have to learn how to use certain tools or read manuals, handbooks, things. And that makes them feel uncomfortable, or they don't feel confident. So one of the first things, it doesn't happen only to dyslexic adults, but I mean, the experience you had as a student affects the way you face challenges as an adult. And one of the main things I need to do with adults is, first of all, work with their beliefs and how they feel, put it on the table, work with that to remove some of those, like show them that that's not true. I mean, it's a feeling and that's true. I mean, it's their feeling. But it's the consequences of that or the effects of that are not the ones they think. And they have other strengths and things to share with the rest that are absolutely needed at
Yeah.
their work. So
So
that's one of the main things.
if I can pick up on this, you said one thing which I found particularly interesting. You said that understanding of dyslexia is not the same now; it's changed. So can you explain what that means? I mean, was it brilliant in the past and terrible now? Was it?
Okay. I think it's better now.
Yeah,
We know more, and we, at least here in Uruguay, the beliefs or the way it was seen in the past, not so far away. I mean, not that back in the time. It was in like a learning difficulty. That's it. Like you're not, and it was associated with things like you're not so intelligent, you're not so able to learn in general.
yeah,
Those are the beliefs. So sometimes, well, teachers didn't know how to go about it. Schools didn't know how to go about it. Sometimes they dropped school. That changed positively in the sense that now I think the whole of Uruguay public and private schools know that dyslexia is a neurological condition that affects reading mainly and writing as a consequence. So the circle of influence of the condition has been narrowed, and it's not that you cannot learn. No, you find it difficult to read, write, spell, and so on.
it's become a
So that's a
specific
positive.
learning difficulty in that respect.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
So in that sense, we know more. And we shorten or narrow the concept to a specific area within learning. What I feel and my experience tells me working with teachers and teacher training and in schools is we still need to move forward. We are still very much focused on what the dyslexic student finds difficult to do.
Yeah.
We need to shift the focus to all the other things that they are really and even more capable of doing than other students. Because what I say is we are looking at one area of the brain, if we go to the neurological origin, which doesn't work the way we think is supposed to work. But they develop other areas of the brain much more than the ones who are not dyslexic, because they need to they need to solve, they need to read, they need to write, they need to do the activities anyway. So they need to find a different way of doing it. So they develop other areas of the brain. And there are incredible experiences. For example, we used to do an evaluation at one of the schools I worked at that evaluated the whole learning profile, cognitive profile. So we evaluated verbal abilities, non-verbal, spatial, quantitative, and then we analyzed the information. And one of the interesting things, and we did it like for 8 or 9 years, and there were some trends that appeared every year. One of them was that dyslexic students, of course, in the verbal area, weren't so strong.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily very low, but not strong, that's for sure. But usually they excelled in the spatial and non-verbal areas. They excelled. I mean, they were above expectations significantly.
Yeah.
And that was something that we have like a talent. They were talented in those areas. So we need to use that talent.
I've never known, I agree with you 100%. And I've never known any dyslexic who's been given a diagnostic assessment or sent for a test because of the good things that they're able to do. Everyone's sent for a test worldwide. Everyone's sent for a test because of what they can't do. And it's so frustrating, isn't it? So, in Uruguay, is there, as it were, then a growing acceptance of dyslexia?
Yes.
There is. So there's less social stigma, there's less sort of prejudice. I'm not saying that there was prejudice, but you know what I mean.
Yes, there is, especially, I think in the educational world, and by that I mean teachers, heads of schools, and so on, they now understand that it's one type of challenge related to reading, writing, and a bit more things, but there's not so much of a stigma. I think parents maybe are the ones who need a bit more information. They are more informed, but there are still those beliefs, or he has dyslexia. Can he continue this school? Can he learn, or can she learn? That's still because as a parent, other fears and things, and they are not specialized in the educational area. So in that sense, there are still things to do. But nowadays, there's not so much of a stigma. No, it's not something seen as a problem or something that can affect the continuity of the student.
Can I ask? I don't know how this question sounds. It may come out and sound really ugly, and I don't mean it to. You talk about the social attitudes in Uruguay as quite positive in this respect, at least far more positive than they used to be. And are these attitudes reflective of a South American context, or reflective of sort of Spanish connections, or where do these attitudes come from? Are they North American? How would you trace that, if it's possible?
I'm not sure. What we have here in Uruguay, I think it's shared, that perception and that way, with Argentina has a similar perception.
Yeah.
I think Chile.
Yeah.
I don't know about the north of South America. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But in our area, south region of South America, I think it's something that it's more or less the same.
Yeah.
I think it helps in the case of Spanish and dyslexia. There's something that helps, and I think that's different from other languages and from English, for example, which is Spanish is a transparent language. So
Could
sometimes
you explain
dyslexic,
for
I mean,
people watching this what a transparent language
yes,
is, please?
it means that letters and sounds, to put it in a simple way, there's a one-to-one correspondence. Letters always sound in the same way, and the same sounds are always represented by the same letters. More or less,
As
there
opposed
are a
to English,
few
where a G
exceptions.
might sound 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah,
Exactly. In
yeah.
English, you have several sounds for the vowels, and depending on the combination of the letters, they correspond to different sounds, and the same sound can be written in different ways. That's not the case in Spanish. So what that helps with is, if you learn all the alphabet and the correspondences, you will be able to learn to decode. You might be a slow reader if
Mm-hmm.
you're dyslexic, for example, but you can be accurate if you practice, because you take your time to decode, but the accuracy will be there because it's a one-to-one correspondence, so it's easier, and that helps with the when it comes to the impact or how dyslexia affects the reader. So if you give them more time, it's tiring, and there are other things to take into account about the learner, no, how the learner lives that moment. But giving more time and certain strategies helps, which is easier than other languages like English, for example.
Is there a national phonics strategy or understanding in Uruguay? So, everybody uses jolly phonics, or everybody uses balanced literacy, or whatever it is. Is there a strategy there?
No, at national level or something like everyone uses, no. In one thing, there are lots of research projects done here,
Mm-hmm.
and there are books and guidelines, yes, that are I mean, they're not compulsory or something that is programmatic or something that appears as a within the national curriculum.
Yeah.
But I mean, we have the teachers have and schools the freedom to choose what to use, but all of them or most of them more or less follow the same programs. The thing is, because Spanish is transparent, it's not that complex at the beginning.
Yeah.
So it's easier to use, and there's not so much of a sequence. The sequence is also complex because
Yeah.
it's learning. I mean, there are different steps, of course, but it's not so complex.
Yeah.
In English, because now many of the schools are bilingual. All of them have English, at least up to a certain point, because within the national curriculum there are there's a subject that is English, but most of the private schools are bilingual. Like that means have part-time English, part-time Spanish, and those schools try to use for English certain phonics programs. Usually the most common one is Jolly Phonics.
Yeah.
That's the one that most schools use. There are others, but most commonly that's the one being used here.
Are there sort of laws or regulations or rules that the government has laid down for inclusive teaching? So, for instance, students in schools, they can have a scribe, or they can have text to speech software, that kind of thing. Is there sort of a reasonable sort of governmental intervention here?
Yes. There's a decree about inclusive education, which states that all people should be able to access education and should be able to be included and their needs taken into account within the educational context. So we do have that. And then there are suggestions and documents from also the government and private organizations that are recognized by the government as guidelines for access arrangements, content arrangements, different types of strategies to be implemented. In fact, in the senior school, in junior school, nobody... now it's improving, but there wasn't that much of a regulation or control of if teachers were implementing the strategies or not. In senior school, there is. So you need to keep a record of the access arrangements or any arrangements you've done for each student and why. What is the profile of the student? and how are you working with that? And they come every now and then, and they like an inspection to check that all schools are complying with that.
Yeah, yeah.
So
And is
yes.
there a national dyslexia organization that sort of pushes for these changes, or provides help for people, or is it all governmental and local organizations, or is there a sort of a joined up system here, or what's the situation there?
There are organizations. Usually, they are associated. They are international. Many of them, or
Like the
some of them, or the
International
ones that get
Dyslexia
here.
Association,
Yeah,
or maybe
exactly,
a Davis
exactly,
dyslexia provider or something. Yeah.
exactly. There's not, for example, at national level. It's so. I think it's so accepted in a way
Yeah,
that
yeah,
there's not so much need. We do
yeah.
have many more organizations for the autism, or with people within the spectrum. There we have lots of organizations because it's still something that needs to be understood and developed. Dyslexia is like it's more natural nowadays, so it's dealt with within. There are parents, um, and see, maybe parents belonging to organizations, but usually they are international organizations, not so much locally
Now,
or
I met
nationally.
you first at UNESCO at an inclusive education conference, I suppose.
Mm.
I mean, is there anything you'd like to reflect on that in the context of Uruguay? I mean, what did you get from that? What did you input to that? How did you connect with others in the region?
Right. Well, about the event, it was one of the things I think it was wonderful is to be in touch. I mean, there and then
Yeah.
with people from all over the world, listening to their experiences, finding things in common to our experience and things that are completely different, because I think that helps to, even if the experiences or the realities in each region or context are different from ours, it opens your mind and makes you look at your reality, in this case, Uruguayan reality, in a different way.
Mm.
So I think in that sense, it was really, really, really enriching. Um, and then one of the main ideas that I think it's important, it's a move that is happening in Uruguay, but we still have a long way to go. And I think it was central at the UNESCO event, is a focus on the person and the singularity of each person, looking at each student. For example, when it comes to dyslexia, I always say there are as many dyslexic profiles as dyslexic students, because um, if I receive as a teacher a report that says that a certain child has dyslexia, okay, and it
Yeah.
tells me part of it. It tells me that reading and writing might be difficult, but what strategies that this child or adolescent put in place to compensate for that? What are the strengths and weaknesses within that reading and writing profile? And then what other things can this child do? Because I need to use those strategies, those strengths to compensate or to develop these others. So focusing on the individuality and the singularity of each child and understanding and that beyond the child or the learner, beyond the label or it's one part of the learning profile, not the learning profile itself. So being careful with that, I think it's really important, and it's a huge responsibility. The other thing I say, every time we receive a diagnosis, apart from asking the professionals who did the diagnosis, if I receive a diagnosis that it just says dyslexia and gives me numbers, it's not useful for me. I need to know, I mean, that child and the family spent money and time in an evaluation. Okay, tell me more about this child. How does the child learn? What can I? And it's a huge responsibility as a school to use that information. If I receive a diagnosis, it's not, okay, now dyslexia becomes the reason why
Yeah.
things happen. No, I need to respond to this. If I'm not going to be able to respond, don't ask for an evaluation or referral.
One of the
So,
problems we've had, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
no,
one of
no,
the
no.
problems that I notice in Britain, and actually in much of Europe as well, is that a dyslexia diagnosis or a diagnostic assessment. I don't like the word diagnosis, but yeah, a dyslexia diagnostic assessment is accompanied by either not much information at all, your kid's dyslexic, or essentially an encyclopedia of information that no one can understand. This is,
Yes.
I think, again, this sounds like a universal problem here.
Yeah.
Yeah, there
Yes.
isn't a simple understanding, therefore,
Yeah.
that parents can get, or that even an adult can get when they're given that
Exactly.
kind of assessment.
And I think it's crucial to work together with, for example, now that you mentioned with the parents to make
Yeah,
the recommendations. Okay, I now have like a profile, a cognitive profile of the child, but then I need information from parents, what things they find difficult or they observe in their child, so that I start like fine tuning the recommendations for that child at home. Teachers, meeting with teachers, how is this child working in at school? And then you try to tailor the recommendations to that student, so that when I read a report with the recommendations, they apply to that child. I read the recommendations and I see the child. I don't see like the diagnosis of dyslexia, no, or the label. I see the child. I understand it works. And it's not something static. You need to continue working with the parents and with the school, because that changes, because learning challenges change, and you need to adjust those recommendations. So it's a two-way thing or three-way thing, and also involving the child. The student knows. I mean, they have the perception, this is difficult for me, I don't like it. We need to be able to read what the child is saying and taking it into account and usually peers, when you have the privilege of working within the school, peers, and incredible things happen, because there are peers that, I know I don't know, you read out loud all the time, and then you do such and such a thing. They observe each other, and they are very natural when they say that, and that's really helpful information. So looking at when at UNESCO, they were saying every child matters and matters equally. I think one of the things when we talk about dyslexia is looking at each child, its feelings, its context, its profile, and thinking of recommendation strategies for that child and with that child. I'm talking about child, but child,
yeah,
adolescent,
yeah,
any age.
yeah.